Natalie Morgan stood in the bridal boutique staring at the white dress hanging before her. 24 hours from now, she should have been walking down the aisle toward Christopher Hayes, the man she had loved for 3 years. Her mother stood beside her, adjusting the veil with trembling hands, tears of joy streaming down her face. Natalie tried to smile, but something felt wrong. She could not explain it, just a hollow feeling in her chest that would not go away. Her phone buzzed. A text from Christopher asking her to meet him at Riverside Cafe, their favorite spot where they had shared countless memories. She assumed he wanted to see her before the wedding, maybe share a private moment before the big day. She told her mother she would be back soon and drove to the cafe with butterflies in her stomach. When Natalie arrived, Christopher was already sitting at their usual corner table. But something was different. His posture was stiff, his eyes avoiding hers. She sat down across from him, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. The gesture sent ice through her veins. Christopher did not waste time with gentle words or careful explanations. He looked at her with cold eyes and said he could not marry her. He had met someone else. Someone more exciting, more spontaneous, more everything that Natalie was not. Victoria Lane was her name. A photographer who lived life on the edge, who traveled to dangerous places, who made him feel alive in ways Natalie never could. Natalie felt the world tilt beneath her. She asked him how long this had been going on. 3 months, he admitted. 3 months of lies while she planned their wedding, while she dreamed of their future, while she believed in him completely. He told her she was too traditional, too boring, too focused on doing things the right way. Victoria made him feel free. The words cut deeper than any knife could. Natalie had always been proud of her values, of the way she carried herself with dignity and grace. She believed in building something meaningful, in waiting for the right person and the right commitment. Christopher had told her he loved those things about her. But now she understood he had been lying all along. The aftermath of betrayal, Natalie drove home that afternoon in shock, her body moving automatically while her mind struggled to process what happened. She had to call everyone. Her parents, her bridesmaids, the venue, the caterer, the florist. Each phone call was a fresh wave of humiliation. Each explanation felt like admitting she was not good enough. Her mother cried on the phone. Her father's voice shook with barely controlled anger. Her younger sister offered to come stay with her, but Natalie refused. She needed to be alone, to figure out how to breathe again without feeling like her chest was caving in. The next morning, the day that should have been her wedding day, Natalie stayed in bed. She stared at the ceiling and wondered where everything went wrong. She replayed every moment of their relationship, searching for signs she missed. Had she been too careful with her heart? Too unwilling to compromise her beliefs? Too boring for a man who wanted adventure? 5 days passed in a blur of tears and sleepless nights. Natalie knew she could not hide forever. She worked at Sterling Global Investments, one of the largest financial firms in the city. She had built a solid reputation there over 4 years as a senior analyst. People respected her work, her attention to detail, her ability to find patterns others missed. She could not let Christopher destroy that too. Returning to reality when Natalie walked into the office on Monday morning, she felt every eye on her. The gossip had spread fast. Everyone knew about the canceled wedding. She heard whispers in the hallways, saw pitying looks from colleagues who quickly glanced away when she turned toward them. Grace Chen, her closest friend at work, tried to catch her attention. But Natalie just shook her head and went straight to her desk. She buried herself in work. Analyzing financial reports and market trends, numbers made sense. They followed rules. They did not lie or change their minds or tell you that you were not exciting enough. For a few hours, she almost forgot about the pain eating away at her insides. But by lunchtime, Grace was not taking no for an answer. She appeared at Natalie's desk with 2 sandwiches and a determined expression. She practically dragged Natalie to a small conference room on the 3rd floor, one that was rarely used and tucked away from the main office traffic. Grace closed the door and turned to face her friend. She did not say anything at first, just looked at Natalie with such genuine concern that the walls Natalie had built started to crumble. The tears came without warning, spilling down her cheeks in hot streams. Grace hugged her tightly while Natalie sobbed, letting out the grief she had been holding back all morning. The confession, when the crying finally stopped. Natalie felt empty, but somehow lighter. Grace handed her tissues and waited patiently. Natalie took a shaky breath and told her everything. She explained how Christopher called off the wedding for Victoria, how he said Natalie was too traditional and boring, how he made her feel like her values were flaws instead of strengths. Then Natalie admitted something she had never told anyone except Christopher. She believed in waiting for marriage, in saving herself for the person she would spend her life with. It was not about religion or pressure from anyone else. It was her choice, made with intention and thought. Christopher had said he respected that decision, that he loved her for her convictions. But now she realized he saw it differently. He saw her as uptight and old-fashioned, someone who could not let loose and have fun. Grace grabbed her hands firmly. She told Natalie there was absolutely nothing wrong with her choices. Having values and sticking to them in a world that constantly pushed people to compromise was brave, not boring. Christopher was a fool who did not deserve her. Any real man would see her integrity as precious, not as a problem. Natalie wanted to believe her friend, but the pain was too fresh. She kept hearing Christopher's voice telling her she was not enough. 3 years of her life felt wasted. She did not know how to move forward when every step felt like walking through broken glass. What neither woman knew was that someone was listening. In the adjacent office, separated only by a thin wall and a door left slightly ajar, Dominic Sterling sat reviewing quarterly reports. He was about to close his door when he heard voices. He recognized Natalie's name and paused. He should have closed the door and given them privacy. But something made him stay quiet and listen to every word that would change everything. Dominic Sterling stood frozen in his office, the quarterly reports forgotten in his hands. He had built an empire worth billions through calculated decisions and careful observations. He prided himself on reading people, on seeing through false pretenses and hidden agendas. But what he just overheard shattered every cynical assumption he had. Developed over years of betrayal and disappointment, Natalie Morgan had worked for his company for 4 years. He knew her by reputation as an exceptional analyst who delivered flawless work consistently. She never sought attention, never played office politics, never tried to climb the corporate ladder through charm or manipulation. She simply excelled at her job with quiet competence. He had spoken to her maybe 5 times, always brief exchanges during company meetings. She was professional, intelligent, and reserved. But now he knew something deeper about her character. In a world where everyone seemed motivated by pleasure, status, or money, Natalie held on to something rare. She had values she refused to compromise, even when it cost her everything. Her ex-fiancé threw away something precious because he was too shallow to recognize its worth. The man was an absolute fool. Dominic moved away from the door and sat down heavily in his leather chair. He thought about his own past, about the woman he almost married 7 years ago. Jennifer had been beautiful, charming, and perfect in every way that mattered to society. She came from the right family, attended the right schools, said all the right things. He was ready to give her everything, then he discovered she was using him. She had been leaking confidential business information to a competitor in exchange for money. When confronted, she did not even show remorse. She simply shrugged and said, "Everyone had a price." That betrayal taught Dominic to trust no one, to see relationships as transactions rather than connections. He built walls around his heart so high that no one could climb them. But Natalie was different. She represented something he thought no longer existed in the world: authenticity, integrity, the courage to stand by personal convictions, even when mocked or abandoned for them. For the first time in 7 years, Dominic felt genuine admiration for another person. Watching from afar over the following days, Dominic found himself noticing Natalie in ways he never had before. She arrived at the office early every morning, often before the sun fully rose. She stayed late when projects required extra attention. She treated everyone with kindness, from the cleaning staff to senior executives. She never gossiped, never complained, never sought recognition for her contributions. He also noticed the sadness that lingered in her eyes. She smiled when people spoke to her, but the smile never quite reached those expressive brown eyes anymore. She carried her pain quietly, refusing to burden others with her heartbreak. Dominic understood that kind of suffering. He recognized the way she threw herself into work to avoid thinking about what she lost. Dominic wanted to do something, though he was not sure what. He was not accustomed to reaching out to people emotionally. Business negotiations he could handle with ease, but genuine human connection felt foreign after years of isolation. Still, something about Natalie made him want to try. He decided to start small. The next morning, he waited in the hallway outside the analysis department. When Natalie walked past carrying a stack of files, he called her name. She turned, surprise evident on her face when she saw him standing there. "Good morning." "Natalie," he said, keeping his voice gentle instead of using his usual crisp business tone. "Good morning." "Mr. Sterling," she replied nervously. Her hands tightened slightly on the files she carried. "I reviewed your analysis on the Thornton merger yesterday," Dominic continued. "The risk assessment was exceptionally thorough. You identified potential issues that my entire executive team missed. That kind of insight is invaluable." Natalie blinked in surprise. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." He nodded and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway looking bewildered. Dominic Sterling never gave personal compliments. Everyone knew he was brilliant but cold, respected but distant. This behavior was completely out of character. Small gestures. The compliments continued throughout the week. Dominic found reasons to acknowledge Natalie's work, always in passing, never making a big production out of it. He praised her attention to detail, her innovative approaches to complex problems, her ability to communicate complicated financial concepts clearly. Each time, Natalie seemed stunned, as though she could not quite believe what was happening. Grace noticed the change immediately. She cornered Natalie in the break room one afternoon, with curiosity written all over her face. "What is going on with you and Dominic Sterling?" Grace asked, keeping her voice low. "He has complimented you more this week than he has complimented anyone in the entire time I have worked here. People are starting to talk." Natalie shook her head, confusion evident in her expression. "I have no idea. I have barely spoken to him in 4 years, and suddenly he is noticing my work. It is strange. Strange." Grace raised an eyebrow. "The most eligible bachelor in the city, who also happens to be your boss and a billionaire, is paying attention to you." "That is not strange, Natalie. That is interesting." Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Please do not read into it. He is just being professional. Maybe he finally looked at some reports and realized I do decent work." But Grace was not convinced, and neither was Natalie deep down. Something had shifted, though she could not figure out what triggered it. The coffee incident Friday afternoon brought an unexpected development. Natalie was working late, finishing projections for a client presentation. Most of the office had emptied out hours ago. She was so focused on her computer screen that she did not hear footsteps approaching until someone spoke. "You should not skip dinner to work." Natalie jumped, nearly knocking over her coffee. Dominic Sterling stood beside her desk holding a paper bag from the Italian restaurant down the street. The smell of fresh pasta filled the air. "Mr. Sterling?" she stammered, standing up quickly. "I did not realize you were still here." "I saw your light on when I was leaving," he said. "I know you have been working on the Harrison account all week. You need to eat." He set the bag on her desk along with a bottle of sparkling water. Before she could respond, he turned to leave. "Wait," Natalie called out. He paused and looked back at her. "Why are you doing this? The compliments, the food, all of it. What changed?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "I realize I have been blind," he finally said. "I spent years thinking everyone had ulterior motives, that genuine integrity did not exist anymore. But I was wrong. Some people still value character over convenience. That deserves recognition." The words hung in the air between them. Natalie felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she had not felt since before Christopher destroyed her world. She did not fully understand what Dominic meant, but his sincerity was unmistakable. Grace's theory, the following Monday. Grace practically ambushed Natalie the moment she arrived at work. She pulled her friend into an empty conference room with barely contained excitement. You need to tell me everything that happened Friday night, Grace demanded. And do not even try to say nothing happened because James from accounting saw Dominic Sterling leave your floor carrying takeout. And then saw him leave again 30 minutes later empty-handed. Natalie explained what happened. How Dominic brought her dinner and made that cryptic comment about integrity and character. Grace listened with growing fascination. He knows, Grace said suddenly. Knows what? About Christopher. About why he left you. About everything we talked about in that conference room. Grace's eyes widened. Natalie, his office is right next door to that room. What if he overheard us? Natalie felt her stomach drop. The thought had not occurred to her, but it made horrible sense. That would explain the sudden attention, the compliments, the kindness. He pitied her. He felt sorry for the pathetic woman who got dumped because she was too boring and traditional. Oh no, Natalie whispered, mortification washing over her. He thinks I am some sad charity case. But Grace shook her head firmly. No. If Dominic Sterling felt pity, he would ignore you like he ignores everyone else. Pity does not make a man like him bring dinner to an employee after hours. That is not pity, Natalie. That is interest. Natalie wanted to argue, but something in Grace's logic rang true. Still, the idea of Dominic Sterling being interested in her felt impossible. He was brilliant, powerful, and worth billions. She was a heartbroken analyst who could not even keep her fiancé faithful. What could someone like him possibly see in someone like her? What Natalie did not know was that Dominic was asking himself the same question from a different angle. He could have anyone, date any beautiful socialite or accomplished executive, but none of them made him feel what he felt when he looked at Natalie Morgan. For the first time in 7 years, his heart was waking up, and it terrified him completely. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, Natalie received an email that made her heart race. Dominic Sterling had requested her presence at a private meeting in his office at 4 o'clock. The message was brief and professional, giving no hint about the purpose of the meeting. Natalie spent the rest of the day alternating between anxiety and curiosity. Grace offered a dozen theories, each more dramatic than the last. Maybe he was promoting her. Maybe he wanted her input on a major deal. Maybe he was going to confess his undying love. Natalie dismissed the last suggestion with an eye roll, but her hand still trembled slightly when she knocked on his office door at exactly 4 o'clock. Come in, Dominic's voice called from inside. Natalie entered the spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Dominic stood near the windows, his silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun. He turned when she entered, and she noticed he looked less composed than usual. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing to the seating area with 2 leather chairs and a small table. Please, sit down. Natalie sat, trying to keep her breathing steady. Dominic took the chair across from her, leaning forward with his hands clasped together. He looked like a man preparing to jump off a cliff. I need to be honest with you about something, he began. A few weeks ago, I overheard a private conversation you had with Grace. I should have closed my door, should have given you privacy, but I listened. I heard everything about what happened with your ex-fiancé. Natalie felt heat flood her face. Her worst fear confirmed. He knew everything, heard her most vulnerable moment, witnessed her humiliation. She wanted to disappear into the floor. I am not telling you this to embarrass you, Dominic continued quickly, seeing her distress. I am telling you because what I heard changed something in me. For 7 years, I believed everyone had hidden agendas. I built walls around myself because I was betrayed by someone I trusted completely. I convinced myself that genuine integrity was a myth, that everyone compromised their values for convenience or pleasure. He paused, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. But you proved me wrong. You have values you refuse to compromise, even when it costs you everything. You carry yourself with dignity, even when hurting. You treat everyone with kindness, even when your heart is breaking. That kind of character is rare, Natalie. That kind of strength is extraordinary. The truth unfolds. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different from the tears she had cried over Christopher. These tears came from being seen, truly seen, for who she was instead of being dismissed for what she refused to be. I thought you pitied me, she whispered. Dominic shook his head firmly. I admire you. More than I have admired anyone in a very long time. Your ex-fiancé was a fool who could not recognize the treasure he had. Wanted someone wild and spontaneous, but those qualities fade. Character endures. Integrity lasts. What you have is worth infinitely more than what he was chasing. The words washed over Natalie like healing balm on an open wound. For weeks, she had internalized Christopher's criticisms, believing she was somehow defective. But Dominic saw her differently. You saw her choices as strengths rather than weaknesses. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly. Dominic stood and walked back to the windows, his shoulders tense. Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Because for the first time in 7 years, I want to try again, to trust someone. To open my heart to the possibility of something real. He turned back to face her. But I also know you have been hurt badly. I know you need time to heal. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just needed you to know that someone sees your worth. That someone recognizes what you have been through is not your fault. Natalie stood slowly, her legs unsteady. She walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. You said you were betrayed. What happened? Dominic told her about Jennifer, about the leaked information and the cold way she admitted to using him. Explained how that experience hardened him, made him cynical about love and relationships. He described the walls he built and the loneliness he accepted as the price of protecting himself. But those walls are not protection, he said quietly. They are a prison. I had been living in that prison for 7 years, and I did not even realize it until I heard you crying in that conference room. You have every reason to build walls after what Christopher did, but you are still kind, still genuine, still brave enough to be yourself. You showed me that staying open despite pain takes more courage than closing off. The conversation was interrupted by Natalie's phone buzzing insistently. She glanced at the screen and felt ice shoot through her veins. Christopher was calling. She declined the call, but moments later a text message appeared. We need to talk. I made a mistake. Meet me at Riverside Cafe tonight. Natalie stared at the message, disbelief washing over her. Dominic noticed her expression change and moved closer. What is wrong? She showed him the message. Dominic's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. Are you going to meet him? I do not know, Natalie admitted. Part of me wants to know what he has to say. Part of me never wants to see him again. Go, Dominic said, though the words seemed to cost him. You need closure. You need to face him and decide what you want without wondering what might have been. But Natalie, remember this. Whatever he says, whatever promises he makes, he already showed you who he is. Believe him the first time that evening. Natalie sat in the same corner booth at Riverside Cafe, where Christopher had destroyed her world weeks earlier. When he walked in, she barely recognized him. He looked tired, his clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. He slid into the seat across from her with a desperate expression. Thank you for coming, he began. I know I do not deserve it. You are right. You do not. Natalie kept her voice steady. What do you want, Christopher? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she once found endearing. Now it just looked pathetic. I made a terrible mistake. Victoria and it fell apart. She was not who I thought she was. All that excitement and spontaneity I craved turned out to be recklessness and instability. She drained my bank account, cheated on me with 3 different men, and left me with nothing. Natalie felt no satisfaction in his suffering, only a strange detachment. This man who once meant everything to her now felt like a stranger. I realize now what I had with you, Christopher continued, reaching across the table for her hand. She pulled back. You're stable, reliable, loyal, everything I actually need. I was stupid to let you go. Please, Natalie, give me another chance. We can start over. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Natalie looked at Christopher and saw him clearly for the first time. He did not love her. He never loved her. He loved the idea of her, the safety net she provided. He wanted her back not because he valued her character, but because his adventure failed, and he needed someone dependable to fall back on. She was his backup plan, his second choice. No, she said simply. Christopher blinked in shock. What? No, I will not give you another chance. You do not get to break me, and then expect me to thank you for coming back when your first choice did not work out. Natalie stood, feeling lighter than she had in months. You told me I was boring and traditional. You made me feel like my values were flaws. But you were wrong. My values are my strength. My integrity is my treasure. I am worth more than being someone's fallback option. But Natalie, we had 3 years together. That has to count for something. It does count, she agreed. It taught me what I do not want. It showed me the difference between someone who claims to love me and someone who actually sees my worth. You never saw me, Christopher. You just saw what I could do for you. She walked out of the cafe with her head held high, leaving Christopher sitting alone at the table. As she stepped into the cool evening air, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Dominic. However this goes, you are stronger than you know. Call me if you need to talk. Natalie smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. She called him immediately. I said no, she told him when he answered. Good, she could hear the relief in his voice. How do you feel? Free, she said honestly. Brew, for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I feel free. Have you eaten dinner? Dominic asked. No. There is a small bistro 2 blocks from your apartment. Meet me there in 30 minutes. We can celebrate your freedom properly. 30 minutes later, Natalie walked into the bistro and found Dominic waiting at a quiet table in the corner. He stood when she approached, pulling out her chair like a gentleman. They ordered wine and pasta, talking easily about everything and nothing. Dominic told her about his childhood, about building his company from the ground up. Natalie shared her dreams of eventually starting her own financial consulting firm. Hours passed like minutes. When the restaurant started closing, they walked slowly through the city streets, neither wanting the evening to end. Dominic walked her to her apartment building, stopping at the entrance. Thank you for tonight, Natalie said softly. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself clearly. Dominic reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was tender, respectful, full of promise. I see you, Natalie. See your strength, your kindness, your beautiful heart. And I would very much like to spend more time getting to know everything else about you. But only if you want that too. It's no pressure, no expectations. Just possibility. Natalie looked into his eyes and saw something she never saw with Christopher. She saw genuine admiration, respect, and the beginnings of something deeper. She saw a man who valued her for exactly who she was, not who he wanted her to be. I would like that, she said. I would like that very much. Dominic smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Ooh, the cold, distant CEO disappeared, replaced by a warm, genuine man who was willing to risk his heart again. Then we will take it slow. We will build something real, something based on honesty and respect. We will do this right. As Natalie watched him walk away, she realized something profound. Christopher leaving her was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of the best chapter she had not yet written. She had been so focused on what she lost that she could not see what she gained. She gained clarity about her worth. She gained strength from surviving heartbreak. And now, she was gaining the possibility of a love that celebrated her instead of diminishing her. 3 months later, Natalie and Dominic were inseparable. He courted her properly, with flowers and thoughtful dates and long conversations that lasted until dawn. He introduced her to his world while respecting her values. He never rushed her, never pressured her, never made her feel like she needed to change. The office gossip exploded, but neither of them cared. Grace was thrilled, claiming she called it from the beginning. Natalie's parents adored Dominic, seeing immediately how much he treasured their daughter. On their 6-month anniversary, Dominic took Natalie to the rooftop of his building. The city sparkled below them like a sea of stars. He held both her hands and looked into her eyes with the vulnerability she had come to love. I know we are taking things slow, he said, but I need you to know something. I love you, Natalie. I love your integrity, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you see the world. I love who I am when I am with you. You make me want to be better, braver, more open. You taught me that love is not about transactions or compromises. It is about finding someone whose values align with yours, whose character matches their words. Tears streamed down Natalie's face as she smiled. I love you too. You showed me what it means to be valued for who I am. Prove that the right person sees your truth as beautiful, not boring. You gave me hope when I thought I would never trust again. Christopher's abandonment had felt like the end of everything. But standing on that rooftop with Dominic, Natalie understood it was actually a gift. It cleared away the wrong person to make room for the right one. It taught her that being true to herself was not a weakness, but the greatest strength she possessed. And it led her to a love that honored her heart instead of breaking it. The innocence Christopher mocked as boring became the very thing that attracted a man of true character. Her values, once criticized as old-fashioned, became the foundation of a relationship built on genuine respect. And the CEO, who everyone thought was cold and distant, turned out to have the warmest heart she had ever known. Sometimes the worst heartbreak leads to the greatest love. Sometimes being abandoned by the wrong person opens the door to being found by the right one. And sometimes the things about ourselves that others criticize are exactly what make us worthy of extraordinary love. Natalie learned that truth was not just spoken. It was revealed through actions, through consistency, through someone choosing her every single day. And as Dominic held her close under the stars, she knew without doubt that she had found her forever. Not because he promised it, but because he lived it. Thanks for watching.